share a quick tweet as well from the account.
I was just about to say, Jintal, this is a
Yeah,
great Mudang pick.
yeah. I couldn't go out as like a gray. I had to put something.
Okay, ready? I'll send a tweet showing that we are live. And here we go. All right, guys. So we are finally live. Maybe I'll send a tweet that I just sent out uh, to your group too, so they can also retweet.
Nice. You can hear
All right.
David hurdling dogs in
Awesome.
the background.
Oh, do you? They are quite far, actually. My microphone is really good. I have like windows are closed and very nice. So I have a good mic. All right, so we are finally live with the Universal Accounts workshop on Berachain. This is the first workshop that we are running, so I'm pretty excited about it. We are gonna show some cool stuff. I'm here with Manny and Jintao, developer relations at Berachain. If you guys want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure, man. Again, thanks, David, for having us on. So I'm Manny, lead developer relations engineering at Berachain, and I am excited to learn more about the chain abstraction, all the types of abstraction that Particle Network is working on for Berachain. But yeah, that's me. I'll popcorn it to Jintao.
Hello, I'm Jintao. I also work in developer relations at Berachain. I also work as Mudang at Berachain. Yeah, that's pretty much me. Been dev for a while, just enjoying working on some like non-standard BGT distribution stuff at Bera. Got to get that plugin, so that's me.
Very nice. That sounds like the best job, actually. I want to be a Mudeng too. It sounds much easier than what we do now. And I'm David, the developer relations at Particle Network. And so today we're going to be able to go over the kind of abstractions that we do. We did a few different kind of abstractions over the years, and now we're focusing on chain abstraction. So that is kind of a big abstraction right there, right? Do we want to jump directly into what chain abstraction is and what it is and isn't, and its use cases and things like that, or do we have other plans?
No, that sounds good, man. I'd love to hear like how you typically talk about chain abstraction and universal accounts when you're. I'm kind of curious of how you phrase it to people that aren't developers and people who are developers. Out of curiosity.
That is a very interesting point. It's a little bit tricky because obviously these kind of products are aimed at both developers and end users, right? Because obviously the big deal with the chain abstraction is improving the user experience, where users don't have to think so much about chains and where their funds are. They just have funds somewhere and they can use them right away. But then we need developers to integrate those tools, otherwise they don't work for the user, right? So essentially, for the user, the idea is that we want to give as seamless of an experience as possible on their side. Ideally, what I like to say is that in the perfect world, a user doesn't even know that there is a blockchain in the back, or that the user doesn't know on which chain they are on, and doesn't even know that there is a blockchain. Obviously, if there is a technical enough user that wants to know what's going on in the back, they still have the option, right? But it shouldn't be the default, in our opinion, in my opinion, because it's. I mean, by now it's a meme, right? How complex it is to do anything on blockchain. I still get the sweats very often if I try to sign a MetaMask transaction, right? And we keep seeing hacks because of just simple signatures all the time, right? So that is the basically the idea on the user side, right? They don't even know that there is a blockchain in the back. That's the perfect word. For the developers, like the official definition that we have is basically of chain abstraction is a tool or an infrastructure that basically allows the user to interact with the chain without manual bridging or manually moving funds around, right? This is kind of the too long didn't read. We actually have a proper official definition that is very wordy, and I don't remember it because it's full of complex words, and I like to use simple words overall. But so the big point that we have on chain abstraction is the user doesn't need to basically move funds around, doesn't need to think which chain the funds are coming from. Obviously, on the developer side, you still need to understand what's going on there, and you still want to know the destination chain, right? Because obviously, for example, if you build an application on Berachain, obviously you're interacting with Berachain, you know that that's the destination. But I think, in my opinion, the main hurdle is the source. I don't want to think like, oh, I have a few dollars on Ethereum, I have a few dollars on Avalanche, I have a few dollars on Solana. How do I put all those together? And this is the problems that we're solving essentially, because you can have all those dollars on those three chains, but you only see it as one balance. And the only thing that you know is like, well, I'm using it on Berachain. Doesn't matter where they come from, right? This is kind of our go-to explanation for that, let's say.
Nice, man. So to recap, chain abstraction is a really good way to be able to get all other tokens onto Berachain.
essentially, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And to do a lot of interactions that way as well, cross-chain.
Yeah, this is actually really one of the main benefits that I usually try to explain to developers, is because I understand it's not a super straightforward concept. Maybe if you're if it's a little bit of a new idea for a developer, for a person, but the main logic here is you have an app that runs on Berachain that does something on Berachain. You don't need to have funds on Berachain. You can use Solana, right? So this is, for example, one of the big benefits that I see is like, your developers don't need to convince people to move their soul and convert into Bera and, move it to Berachain. They can use their soul, and then obviously it's gonna settle on Berachain using Bera, but everything is hidden in the back, right? Hence the abstraction part, I guess.
Nice.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I kind of see it as like, if you think about it, you're almost like these rails, or kind of like this, almost like if you think of it like a traditional payment system or whatnot, like let's use like Stripe as an example. Like before Stripe, you had like authorize.net and a few other payment platforms and whatnot. And it was really hard to do integrations with like payments and like, not to mention banking and all this stuff, right? And then when Stripe came along, it was a lot easier for kind of integrate and not think about all the payment providers, processing fees, invoicing, et cetera, and kind of like abstract a lot of that process out and let developers essentially work on the platform that they actually wanted to work on. And this is where I kind of see like Particle come into place as well, which is great, which is like, like if you have an app, like, or a game, let's say an example, you're really like, hey, I don't want to think about all these other aspects, but I know that I want an on-chain experience. Like I want to know that I'm going to use that infrastructure in the background. Like, can I just get something that's easy for me to plug in and start working with, and not have to worry about like the custom aspects or the custom interactions with a specific chain as well, right? So I think that that's a key benefit too, that I'm hearing also from chain abstraction as well.
Exactly. That is, that is one of the big benefits that we see there, especially because there are so many different chains, right? That often developers kind of need to compromise, I think, on where they build, because maybe there is a chain that is better suited for the use case, but the chain doesn't have any liquidity on it, doesn't have users on it. And then they're like, well, this is the best option that I have from the technical point of view, but I cannot use it because otherwise I wouldn't have any users. So I need to build a compromise somewhere else that allows me to also have users. And this eliminates that, because now you can build on the chain that suits your app best. And then if the liquidity is somewhere else, is still okay, right? So that is the big thing. And for example, what I wanted to show today is exactly that. The little demo that we're gonna have and we're gonna show is, I don't have any funds on Berachain, but I'm interacting with a smart contract on Berachain, right? So that is the big benefit that I see here, right?
Can we preface that you're using real funds for this, because you're
yes,
you're a baller, and obviously Particle has a lot of money to be able to spare.
No, it's because that is because the universal account infrastructure is actually only on mainnet. We go directly to prod, right? Testing prod. That's
there
how,
you go.
That's how you do it. No, I think I actually don't have an official reason of why it's only on mainnet. I am assuming that is because there is a lot of moving parts that work in the back to move funds around, and for the solver networks and the kind of intent-based infrastructure. And I'm assuming not this infrastructure is not available on all the testnets. Testnets are unreliable often; they're not as stable. So I'm assuming this is the reason why we only have it on mainnet. But yeah, we test in prod. That's how we do it. So yes, whatever you see today, that's gonna be 100% on mainnet. So the infrastructure is 100% live. The SDK is 100% public and free to use, essentially. So what we were trying to achieve here is want to show developers building on Berachain how they can leverage this infrastructure to basically pull liquidity into Berachain, right?
And David is also going to be responsible for thousands and thousands of dollars of inflow into Berachain right now. Is that right?
Of course, because I have that much pull. I have that much pull.
No, just joking. But yeah,
that's what we do. But if that happens, I'm happy to help. Very nice.
So I think now you wanted to show us in terms of like what the finished product that we're going to be demoing today, etc.
Yeah, we want to go directly into that. It doesn't look like we have any question or anything like that, so I think we can move directly into that part.
Yeah, definitely, man. I'd love to see how it kind of works. And what kind of what's the tech stack that you're currently using for this, out of curiosity?
I'm just gonna share my screen here. This works. So this is just the docs. I wanted to go briefly over it, but so the tech stack that I usually use is just Next.js, essentially. So Universal Account SDK is both, I would call it a both backend and frontend SDK or package. You can use it either way. It actually works in React Native as well. So that's a bonus, I guess. But yeah, you can use it in both frontend and backend. You can use it directly with a private key, for example, or with login authentication package. Like it can be regular browser provider like MetaMask, Particle Connect, like we use in this case for social login, or any other authentication method. You can use Privy or any other of those packages. So what I wanted to go over basically here is kind of give an overview of what the universal accounts are. So here are the docs. We're gonna link them somewhere, maybe after it's all done. I'll link a GitHub repository, documentation, all this fun stuff. So basically, we talked about this chain abstraction infrastructure, universal accounts, but what is it? How does it work? And how do I use it? So essentially, the universal account is just a smart account. It's a near tree ERC4337 based smart account. So it acts exactly the same way as any regular smart account. I usually call it kind of a specialized smart account because it has a little bit more nuances in the back. For example, this smart account lives on every chain that we support in the stack, which right now are 13. Man, my connection is low. It will be all those chains here. So we support basically the main EVM chains plus Solana. So basically the smart account or universal account is available on all of those. It is deployed the first time that you transact on one of those chains. So usually the first transaction that you run on that chain might be a little bit more expensive, especially if it's usually relatively irrelevant, except on Ethereum. We often get quite a few complaints like, oh, why is gas fee so high? I paid $40 for gas. And it's like, was that your first transaction in Ethereum? Yes. There it is, because you're deploying the smart contract for the account, right? So the smart accounts are deployed the first time they use it on the specific chain. And then we have a piece of infrastructure in the back that basically synchronizes the state of your smart account on all of the chains, right? So this is more on the technical side of how it works, or how it's built. How you use it is really is a smart account. Once you log in into the app and the user has a wallet available, an account with an address, then you can initialize that universal account with the address, and the EOA that the user used to log in becomes the owner of the smart account or the universal account. And then when you send transaction through the universal account infrastructure, then the EOA at the end is signing a message for it. So the user has control of that account their way. It is completely permissionless because we do not have access to any of that, because obviously we don't have access to the main account, right? So
what I'm hearing is like, for any time that there's a new transaction on any of the chain as your initial wallet, you're always going to do a deployment of a 4337 contract.
The first time, yes.
Yeah, the first time on that particular chain. And
yes, exactly.
You guys are handling deterministically the same address, or is it different addresses on?
No,
okay,
it's the same address on every chain.
Nice.
Actually, we a good example is Universal X, which is the trading app that we built around it. That's an interesting story because we started obviously building the universal account infrastructure, and then we're like, hey, why don't we build a demo for it? We build Universal X, so hey, you can trade tokens on any chain with your universal account, and then it actually grew in something useful. So like now we're continuing building it, right? But you can see that very well, for example, because when you go to deposit, we still have a UI that shows each chain separately with like a copy this address to deposit on it, but it's the same address. Some people were confused in the beginning by having only one address for all the chains, so now we separate like that, but it's always the same address. The only one that is not the same is Solana. I mean, it stays the same, but it's not an EVM address, obviously, right? And I'm gonna show it better now in the demo. We can go over the actual demo if you want to. This is essentially the little app that I built for it. I'll link the repository and everything once we're done with this. As I was mentioning, you really only need a point of authentication for the user. In this case, I'm using Particle Connect because it makes sense that we use this. Particle Connect allows you to basically integrate social logins and wallets within the same package, so it's very convenient on this side. I'm using my Twitter account in this case to log in, and it just takes up a few seconds. Do I need to click stuff? Yes.
You do using Twitter and then using GitHub will it give you different accounts? Like it does.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and this will be the underlying EOA, right? So Particle Connect essentially, when you use a social login, it basically creates an externally owned account through our infrastructure, which is still non-custodial. It's a mix of MCP and TSS. Basically, it generates a private key based on your login It can be Twitter, Google, or any other of them, or GitHub. And then the private key is split in two parts. Half of it stays on your local device, half of it stays in our TE, and then it gets basically used to sign the transaction at the end. So we don't have access to the user's wallets, essentially. But yes, there was a lot of words to say. If you log in with a different account, it's going to lead to a different EOA. If it leads to a different EOA, it's going to lead to a different universal account. But this is specific to Particle Connect, for example. You can use whatever other, you can use just basic MetaMask if you want to. Particle Connect also has ways to basically link more than one social login. So let's say you create an account with Twitter, and then you want to add your GitHub on top, you can. And then both of them at that point are going to lead to the same. That was kind of a parenthesis. But so once we log in, basically what I want to show here is the three addresses that we can basically access through a universal account and the UA. The first one is the wallet address. So in this case, is this one here ending in 7430. This will be the externally owned account, which is linked to my Twitter account because I logged in with the Twitter account, right? So in this case, if you log in with MetaMask, this will be your MetaMask address, right? And then the universal account is added on top of this. And in this case, we have two addresses. One is an EVM address and one is a Solana address. This seems a little bit counterintuitive because I'm saying, hey, we have one account with one balance. Why do I have two addresses? And that is because we support both EVM chains and Solana. So if you want to deposit EVM EVM assets, if it can be USDC, USDT, Ethereum, you are going to deposit it on this address here. It doesn't matter which chain is on, right? As long as it's any of those chains here, you can deposit it, and it is going to show in your account here, and is going to be under your control. The Solana address is used for the Solana assets, right? If you want to deposit USDC or Sol on Solana, then you'll deposit it to your Solana universal account. The thing is that assets deposited on either of them are going to be displayed as one balance right here, right? So for example, right here, I'm seeing I have $4.13. And right now, I didn't really build a breakdown here because it adds quite a bit of complexity. But basically, the SDK returns a full breakdown if you want to, and you can use it to build widgets or whatever you like to show the full breakdown. These $4 right now are divided in a few different assets and a few different chains. So I actually have some Sol on Solana for this and some USDC on Optimism, I believe, and maybe Arbitrum. So I have this USDC spread across a few different chains, and I only see this balance of $4.13, and I can use this balance as I please, right? For example, this Mint NFT button leads to an interaction with a smart contract on Berachain, where it's super basic, it just mints an NFT. But the idea is that I don't have any Bera, and I'm still being able to interact with it and mint the NFT, right? So if I click mint NFT, we get the prompt to sign a message. And this is basically the message that we sign. As you can see here, we are signing it from this address here, which is my externally owned account, right? So that is the owner of the actual universal account. So I confirm, and this is live, so it's probably something gonna go wrong as usual. Oh no, it worked. And once we had a transaction, I can see it. Right now, I'm using Universal X essentially as a block explorer because the idea of the transaction that you receive from the SDK is not really a transaction hash because there are a few different transactions involved, right? But here is a good example of what's going on is we sent a transaction from the universal account, which is this one here, right? We have three different hashes because first of all, we have a settlement transaction on the particles mainnet, layer 1. I don't talk much about this layer 1 that we run because it's not really a layer 1 in the traditional sense. Is not a layer 1 a user or a developer interacts with directly. It's not like Berachain that's like, oh, I deploy a contract on it. This is not the case. This is just a layer 1 that we use to basically run the validations in the backend, making sure that everything is valid and confirmed. And then we have 2 hashes here. One on Optimism, because I have some funds on Optimism, and those are actually the funds that we used to settle the transaction on Berachain. So what this is telling me, you use some of your funds that you had on Optimism to settle the transaction on Berachain, right? And if we go see the transaction on Berachain, this should be the mint transaction, essentially. This one here, yes. And you can see that we were able to mint this fancy NFT ID number 4 because I ran a couple of other tests before. But from here, it becomes a regular transaction on Berachain, right? So the recap here is I used funds I had on Optimism. I don't even know what token this was. I'm not even sure if it was either Ethereum or USDC. And this is the kind of abstraction that I want to have, right? Like I don't know. I know that I have something, but I used it and settled it on Berachain. And then this transaction on Berachain becomes basically a regular kind of account abstraction transaction, right? Because that's a smart account.
Can we see the NFT? I'm kind of curious now.
Sure. Where can I see it? I mean, it's kind of dumb, but it's just an AI generated image. But
there we go.
That is.
Wait a second. Is that Mudang?
It's not actually. That is a good coincidence, though. I was actually trying to go for a capybara because capybara is kind of our animal at Particle, but yeah, ChatGPT wasn't too good of an artist in this case. But it does look like Mudang.
Excellent. I like it. I'm a huge fan.
Perfect.
I approve of this mint.
Awesome. Then that was the intent. That is perfect. So this is kind of the whole idea behind of it. I have some funds somewhere, and I'm interacting with a smart contract on Berachain. And obviously, this example here. It would be applicable to any example, right? Like Berachain, for example, it's big apps on Berachain are big on like yield farming and this kind of like liquidity work. So you could easily deposit liquidity in Berachain, like found a new app, a new platform that I like. I want to deposit my Berachain to earn yield, but I don't need to move to actually take my assets. Let's say Solana. I don't have to take my Sol, move it to somehow an EVM or move it to a centralized exchange, buy Bera, and then send it back. You can do it directly from that Solana, right?
Does Particle like maintain all the infrastructure for the intents as well for like all the RPCs, or does it rely on? Okay.
No, for the RPCs, no. The RPC, I don't believe so.
Because I would assume that's a lot of infrastructure. Just keeping track of different RPC endpoints, checking if a transaction goes through on your layer 1 to be able to validate the transaction and then be able to forward it to another RPC as well. So yeah, that's quite an infrastructure that you would have to maintain. And do you know
there is quite a bit.
How long does it typically take to set up like this solver solution on a new network and kind of get liquidity on it, just out of curiosity?
So for the time being, the liquidity network is permissioned. So we run 100% of it right now. For now, my understanding is that it's relatively simple. There is one liquidity provider on each of the chain that we support with some liquidity in it. It's usually a stable coin. So we hold usually USDC or USDT on each chain. On Berachain, I'm not 100% sure. I assume it's USDC. I don't think we have USDT there. So we hold USDC because obviously it's easier to do math with it because it doesn't change. Its price, its value doesn't change. And then when a transaction is settled on it, this USDC is converted into Bera with local infrastructure. So we use some DEX basically on Berachain to source the Bera from the USDC, and then we use it to settle the transaction. And then the liquidity provider takes it back from the user on other chains. And then there is some other infrastructure that rebalances across all the different chains. But to answer your initial question, to set it up, it's quick. It's only probably a couple of days of engineering work. But right now it's permissioned. We are actually planning to have it permissionless at some point in the future. I don't have a specific roadmap for it, but the idea will be that anybody can become a liquidity provider essentially on the whole infrastructure. That is the main idea.
Nice.
Yep. So yeah, this is basically the whole demo and the whole idea of it. We should have time to probably go through a little bit of the coding. It's pretty straightforward if we want to. My initial idea was to keep the workshop relatively short. We're already 30 minutes, but we can maybe start going over that part if you guys are good with that.
Yeah, even going over some of the code, like an overview, would be good to kind of see how the SDK is being used as well. Would love to see that.
Yeah, of course. So let me see.
While
Looks
you
like I have to change.
I was going to say, while you're pulling that up, you mentioned a lot in terms of 4337 being like these deployments that are set up. Is Particle looking at like 7702 as different implementations as like chains start adopting them more and more? Like, is that a roadmap? Do you think that that's coming is on your guys' radar in terms of something that you were thinking of doing? Or is that something where you're like, hey, no, we're going to stick to 4337?
That is indeed a good question. The short answer is yes, we are looking into 7702 because we built this infrastructure, basically these tools and this infrastructure to improve user experience. A very big point of friction, in our opinion, is that the fact that every time you have a new app, you either have a new account, especially if it's a smart account, you either have a new empty account that you need to somehow fund, and so you still need to source funds from wherever you might have them, right? And this is one of the kind of limitation that the universal accounts have at the moment. If you create a new universal account, that account is going to be empty, and you have to somehow fund it. So basically, we are trying to use 7702 to basically skip the step. If you generate a universal account from a wallet that already has funds in it, for example, your MetaMask or another wallet that you might have, then those funds will be reflected into the universal account and being available right away, right? So this is kind of our view of 7702. We are working on it. I don't have a specific timeline for it, hopefully soon, but we are working on it, essentially. Yeah. And this was a good question about the idea of 7702, and on our side is mostly for user experience. Do you have any insights on your side about user experience on Berachain? Do you see what do you see are the main points of friction on Berachain to onboard the new users, essentially?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things when it comes to Berachain that we are like leveraging as much as possible. One is definitely UX is one of the things that we've seen different apps starting to implement. Like we were one of the first chains to deploy like Petra upgrades. So we had everything from like 7702 to BLS signatures to a whole bunch of all the IPs that kind of essentially came with Petra. More specifically on the UX side, even us, because we have like native dApps, like our Bex in terms of the hub, as well as a potential new app that's coming out fairly soon. We redid the hub to be able to kind of maximize on 7702 to be able to kind of really streamline the idea of doing approvals and then being able to do transfers. So we leverage those batch transactions, and I think this is the other standard with it, which is called 5792. So it's like an RPC request that's basically caught by your wallet that allows you to deploy a specific contract that allows you to do batch transactions. So basically now for a lot of the interactions, we've just like tried to eliminate as much as possible any additional steps that a user needs to take, like an approval, then another sign a message, then all those other steps that require, well, maybe not sign a message, but all the steps that require like multiple approvals. I think this is where we've kind of tried to optimize as much as possible. And then in terms of like sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And then in terms of like friction, I definitely think that inflow can be sometimes a bit of a point of friction. So I do think where like intent-based like solutions like chain abstraction really do help in terms of just getting funds on the chain quickly, or in terms of bridging from other solutions. And I've seen other intent solutions as well. Like intents in general are just really fast compared to traditional bridging. So when you're able to kind of get at that fast finality that we have, it's very easy to say, hey, you already have the funds really quickly. So I think that that's definitely a point of failure. And we're trying more and more to kind of work with partners with like yourself, where we have more intent-based bridging or intent-based actions that allow for those types of blue chip tokens to be able to kind of just populate on chain as well. So yeah, I would say those are probably the two things that come to mind as well for friction points.
Very cool. That sounds pretty good to me, because it sounds like that's exactly what we're solving here. I feel like there is a lot of complementary actions here, especially on bringing liquidity into. Actually, with this SDK, you could basically build a bridge in like 5 lines of code, right? I guess it's not the main intent that we had building this infrastructure to build bridges, but you could, right? You could very much use it as a bridge. I'm curious about about 7702. You said that you already have it live, essentially running on Bera's apps, right?
Correct.
That is pretty cool. Can you give a few more details about how you're using it? Essentially, you mentioned you're kind of using it mostly to streamline users' actions. I'm just mostly curious about how someone is actually using it in a real production app instead of just theory.
Yeah, I can talk about this one.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I think the main way to leverage 7702 that I've seen and that I've kind of actually worked on examples for as well is around 2 things. One, the first being batch transactions, and then the second probably being like gas sponsorship. Batch transactions are cool because Berachain does have a bunch of DeFi projects, and you have like building blocks. And so, like, let's say for example, if I wanted to do some kind of leveraged position on Dolomite or some kind of whatever lending platform, right? I can kind of pre-compute those and batch those. That's kind of a more complex thing where you'd need a bespoke solution because it kind of uses results and things like that. But multiple token approvals on one go. Simple adding liquidity. So like if you were adding to like a V2 position, right, you approve 2 tokens and then do that deposit. You can kind of do that in one go. So that's something that I find particularly useful. And then being able to kind of also, because we were able to get Tetra Live so early, get that integrated for people to use, within MetaMask, for example. They use their own contract, but still being able to send those, those special send calls to the wallet is something that I find is beneficial, and it's going to, significantly improve app UX the more people adopt it. Just because, I think when you talk to people about why don't you like using the EVM, like people who are new, for example, who came in Solana, a lot of it's like, I don't like the approvals, I don't get it, like I have to revoke things, I'm going to get rugged by approval. And so like to kind of remove that from the process and the UX, I think is like, it's pretty big. And then kind of the other part of that is gas sponsorship. So, like you kind of take it even a step further where it's not exactly it's not exactly like how you're describing it, but right, like these people can kind of sponsor transactions, and so you can almost emulate like a more Web 2 feel with it, where they don't even have to pay gas. And so, like the protocol can kind of take that on, and where Berachain, gas is quite inexpensive. It makes it like a huge difference for like a protocol can spend like a couple dollars on gas, like like probably less than $100 a month, and people can come and use their dApp on Bera, and it's almost as if they're on a Web 2 app, right? It's like they're not having to pay anything.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, that is how I would think that a regular user experience should be, right? And yeah, very true about the low gas on Berachain. Like I deployed 3 or 4 of those smart contracts just to test things around a couple days ago. I think I spent less than a cent to deploy all of those.
Yeah, it's really low.
I mean, they were very basic smart contracts, right? Maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 lines of code, but still, less than a cent to deploy 3 or 4 of those. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good deal. Nice.
That's Berachain's slogan. We're about good deals on chain.
See, I might not bring thousands of dollars of volume into Berachain today, but I can give you some marketing slogans then. Should we go over kind of some of the code here just to give an idea of what's going on here? It's overall pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. First question though I have for you is: did you on purpose try to match the theme of your code, your IDE, to Particle?
You know that I never noticed that. I have this theme. I've been using this theme for years now, way before joining Particle, actually. If anyone likes the theme, is the Cyberpunk, I think it's called 2077 theme on VS Code.
That makes total sense.
This is my go-to theme whenever I install a new ID. But yeah, so we can just briefly glance over the code. It's pretty straightforward. Doing some live coding is going to take a whole bunch of other extra time. The repository is public on Particle Network GitHub. We'll link it into the tweets and everything here. We mentioned the tech stack earlier. This is Next.js. I'm using Next.js 14 right now. I know it's not the latest version, but that's what I'm using. I think is the most stable with Particle Connect right now. That's why I'm using that one. So the idea here is, as I mentioned, there is a whole bunch of infrastructure here that are like states and use effects and so on and so forth. But so let me create some space here. The Universal Account SDK is under this name here. You can install it with npm yarn. Pretty straightforward. Everything, all the instructions are on the docs. You actually need to install Ether.js as well with the Universal Account SDK. You don't need to use Ether.js for running transactions or other infrastructure in your app if you don't want to, but Ether is one of the dependency of the SDK itself. So just keep that in mind. And then the only other things that you need really is a way for a user to connect to your app. In this case, I'm using Particle Connect. I'm not really going over that part, but all these states here, essentially, this is all infrastructure for Particle Connect. Once the user is logged in, you're going to have access to an address, right? In this case, we have this constant here address taken from one of the hooks. But essentially what you do next is you initialize a universal account from that address. And the code for that is in this use effect here, is essentially this part here. So as you can see, you need 8 lines of code or so. There are a bunch of comments as well. This one here is not necessary, but you just have a few lines of code to initialize the universal account. You basically just use this universal account class that you import from the SDK up here, right? You initialize it, and you just use the address of the EOA in this owner address field in the object. Project ID, client key, app ID is all values that you find from the particle network dashboard. This is a standard situation that we use for all our packages. And then when you initialize the universal account, you can also enable trade configuration. So far, I talked about universal account as a way to basically interact with smart contracts or with dApps on the various chains. We actually run the full swap infrastructure through the SDK as well. So you can actually send swaps transactions as well. This demo here is about calling a smart contract function, but you could also send just a swap transaction. And that's why I said, oh, you could build a bridge with like 20 lines of code, because you could just swap tokens around, essentially, right? Obviously, the documentation has all the various type of transactions available. So essentially, the steps to use the universal account is your user logs in, you have an address available, you initialize the universal account here. Then in this other use effect, we are fetching the data, some data from the universal account. So once we have it, we use this method from the universal account instance. We do get smart account options. Get smart account options basically retrieve those three, which are the addresses that you saw in the demo. So you can still fetch the original UA address that is associated with the universal account, or the EVM address and the Solana address. I always show this part because it's part of it. Usually you want to give information to users. So that's how you display, how you fetch and how you display it. This part is not really necessary to make it work, for example, to make the transaction work. But it's useful to display data, right? Then this is a little bit messier than I remembered. But somewhere I also have a way to fetch the universal balance. And why can I not? Says I've been messy. I put it all the way at the end. Don't say this is a demo. Don't take it as a good practice for production apps. But then once you have the universal account instance, you can also fetch what we call primary asset from the get primary asset method. So essentially, this is what shows you the unified balance and the full breakdown of all your assets. So this method is going to return an object that I store in assets here. This object is going to have the full breakdown of all the tokens, of all the primary tokens on all the chains that we support. As a note, as I mentioned, what we call primary tokens are the tokens that actually show up in the universal balance and that are usable to be spent across the chains for either smart contract interaction, swaps, or anything like that. In this case, at this moment, primary assets are Ethereum, so ETH, USDC, USDT, BNB, BTC on one of the layer 2. And I think that's it.
Is Sol in that as well?
Sol, yeah. Thank you for that. I've been talking for like 15 minutes. My brain is starting to. Yes. So those are all the assets that are basically aggregated and they show in the universal balance. And those are the assets that are spendable across the chains. For example, for the swap transaction, swap infrastructure, you can swap to any token that you want to. But those are for now the assets that you can spend to swap into those tokens, right? So that's how we fetch basically the assets. And then in this case, I just store the whole thing and then I just extract the USD value. If we go in the UI down here, where do I have it? This one here. We take primary assets and then there is a field that is called the total amount in USD. So this is one of the kind of user experience improvements that we try to make. Most of the data that you extract, it can be transaction previews, fees previews, and stuff like that. We always give the value in US dollars as well, so it's a little bit easier to basically display to your users. And then going into the transaction is this part here. So essentially what you do is you generate a transaction through the universal account that you created dot create some transaction method. In this case, I'm using create universal transaction. This is the kind of transaction that you use in case you want to interact with a smart contract function directly. It can be a create swap transaction, can be a convert transaction, can be a transfer. We have a whole bunch of different methods that you can use. In this case, what we do is it becomes essentially, beyond the initial part here, it becomes a regular transaction object, right? Where I am using the smart contract address that I deployed on Berachain. I just have a very basic interface here for the function that I'm calling. In this case, I'm calling the main function. And then I place it basically, oops, I messed something up here. Oops. And then I place it in this transactions array, where each transaction, it's an object, where it's just the usual to, from, whatever, the value that you want to transfer, data, call data that you want to send. In this case, we just called it the function over there. So these
quick question about that for the transaction array. Can you send multiple transactions to different chains within that as well?
Oh, with different chains. I would say no.
And
because you select the chain, the destination chain right here.
Got it.
Yeah.
But would you, I guess, as you can send multiple transactions, almost like batching them as well?
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can from here. Yep.
So how does this one work then with that? You just showed us the MET and then the optimism transaction, and then I'm looking at the code, and then you have the transaction and you sign it and you send it. I guess the send transaction, you're kind of wrapping some extra data in there, or can you walk us through that? Because how does the OP transaction get generated, for example?
So that one is generated in the backend, because essentially this transaction needs to be settled on Berachain mainnet, and we need funds for it. And in this case, I had some funds on Optimism that the system decided to use because it was the most efficient way. And so everything in the backend for that side is done basically automatically. Whereas this is the best option that I have, so this is what I'm gonna do. What's happening is that the solver system fronts the cost on Berachain, and then it takes it back from some other chain where I have funds, and in this case was Optimism. If that kind of answered the question.
I'm curious. So this takes okay. So it's from the account abstraction accounts and whatnot. So as long it's not your EOA specifically, right? As long as the universal
it's from
account,
the universal account, exactly.
So as long as there's funds that are whitelisted on those universal account, the SDK will just recognize those specific assets, sell them off or swap them essentially, and then communicate an intent to, or essentially send them or not maybe to an intent-based system, and then the intents pick up the message, and then on the destination chain proceed with the actual transaction.
Yeah. So I think what happens is that whenever the system understands that everything is validated and they can send a transaction, then the costs are covered on Berachain, and then the tokens taken from the account go somewhere. And then I think those are processed after and rebalanced later on, I assume. Because we always try to keep stable coins on those solvers. And then obviously if you make a big transaction, let's say a big transaction that removes, I don't know, $2,000 worth of stablecoins from Berachain, those are going to need to be replenished. So then there is some rebalancing after that. But yeah, we use some other, basically other systems to swap and rebalance. And we actually, I believe we use actual bridges as well in the back. So, when we talk about chain abstraction and no more bridging, we talk about no more bridging for users, right? We actually still use the infrastructure. But the idea here is that once the transaction is created here, so this transaction object that I have right here, right now, this is going to have a whole lot of data. If you print this out, it has a lot of data because it has basically every step that is happening. It has, okay, what you need to do, and the transaction needs to be settled. It has a description of which tokens are taken from the user, what is used, the fees, and everything. So you can actually use these to give some extra data to the user, like preview a transaction, cost, and so on and so forth. Within the information that are coming here, there is a root hash, and that's what you sign from the actual EOA. So then at the end, you just sign a message to send a transaction. You sign the message with the root hash, and then once you have the message signature, then you can send it through this send transaction method. So we talked quite extensively about this, but it's very straightforward process. It's basically this is the whole code that you need to send a transaction, right? And if instead of this, I had a swap transaction, for example, I will have a bridge, right? Directly. So that's why I mentioned you could build a DEX or a bridge in just a few lines of code. We also have these expect tokens right here that is empty right now because I'm not trying to lock any token for this transaction. But let's say that this function, this mint function, needed a payment. Let's say I needed to pay, I don't know, 0.5 Bear to actually mint this. Then you could reserve the whatever token you need. Make sure that the transaction actually sends that token to the destination. But this is more nuanced approach, I guess.
So it's like a hard check to be able to make sure like you need this a certain amount. Then it won't actually process the intent swap unless it actually calculates that it makes sense to be able to swap it over.
Exactly. Yeah, something like that. And then here we still mention the destination chain, right? For example, this transaction needs to set on Berachain, so that's how we set it up here. And as we saw from the demo itself, then the user doesn't really know that there is Berachain in the back, doesn't know which tokens, where the tokens are coming from. If they want to know, they can, obviously, because as I said, this object here is going to return the full breakdown. So it says, hey, you are trying to do this, and you can display it if you want. You are trying to do this. Those are the tokens that we're taking. Those are the amounts, and this is why. So abstraction in our case doesn't mean we are trying to hide things from the user, but we give the option not to include the complexity if we don't want to, right?
Makes sense. Does the SDK, is it a hard dependency that you have to use ethers? I would assume with the SDK.
You have to install it, but you don't have to use it. So for example, here to sign the signature, to sign the signature here, it's here. I'm using Particle Connect because that's what we're running. And Particle Connect, for example, uses VM. So if you have, I don't know, if you use just a regular browser provider, then you can use ethers, you can use VM, you can use whatever you like.
And is the SDK set up so that it just works completely on client side as well? I'm just out of curiosity, because like some SDKs like require like specific Node.js like functions, like maybe not like FS like imports for files or whatnot, but like crypto, as an example, is not necessarily available on the client side. So if you're running like VJS and it's just all client side, Can it run that as well, or is it primarily like it needs something like Next.js to be able to kind of pull in those functions?
No, you can run it. You can run it on its own as well. We actually have examples on. I can link those examples too, where you can just run it by itself with a private key, for example. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I think that's mostly how we actually use this infrastructure within Universal X. I assume it's mostly backend like that.
Yeah, but it's cool. What we've learned today is that you can get a Mudang NFT on Berachain.
Yep. So in the repository, you can find the contract. You just have to call this mint function. So feel free to abuse it.
Excellent.
Pretty sure it's uncapped. You can have all the fake Mudang NFTs that you like.
Excellent. Get bootleg Mudang NFTs on Berachain. Let's go.
A purple Mudang, by the way. But yeah. So yeah, this is essentially how you can use the universal account. Really, the last question that I wanted to ask you guys, since we're talking about apps and everything, and then we can probably start closing this out. I'm lost here for a second. What kind of apps? What are the main kind of apps that you've been seeing on Berachain? I think mostly DeFi, I assume.
I might let Jintao take this one or whatnot.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think for Berachain, yeah, most of the apps we'll be seeing are, right now we have things like Dolomite and Kodiak, which are a lending platform, and DApps, several others, etc. But also things like Puffball and Neat, which are not like your traditional DeFi protocol. So I don't know if there was a bit more to the question. I think, but yeah, I think that leveraging things like 7702 or account abstraction to let people kind of get into position on these dexes, get into the reward vaults, lend, borrow. These are kind of like the opportunities I see, at least with respect to these DeFi protocols. And then, yeah, it might even be cool to do something like bullish, or you can do some like cross-chain bull spanking. I'm not sure if you're, or bear spanking, or whatever. It's a spanking game. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but that's just kind of an amusing thing.
I think I've heard something. Yeah, I think I've seen something similar.
but maybe to just interject here, like I think it's not necessarily that it's just DeFi that it's like that's driven on Berachain. If you think about it, it's really just like bootstrapping businesses. If you think about it, like everything around Berachain, like the whole proof of liquidity system is really set up to bootstrap, businesses. So like when we hear about like a gaming app or, PuffPal or, Slap to Earn or some other solution or whatnot, they're all trying to find product market fit, right? And they're trying to do a business, right? So, and the interesting thing is that them offering incentives to be able to get certain block rewards from validators, that's their way or their gateway into being able to actually start bootstrapping things. So when we say like Berachain is DeFi focused, it's really, I don't necessarily think it's like primarily DeFi focused. I think there's DeFi products that are very, very specific, but I think it's more product market fit and it's bootstrap focused as anything. Like with any company, you need money, right? So that's what I think Berachain is really focused on, is really just trying to get dApps to be bootstrapped, to be able to find that product market fit and see that it's an actual business, right? So I just want to distinguish that, because I'm like, it's not, there is DeFi, but it's like, this is just, just business, right?
Yeah. No, that is a good definition. That definitely clarifies a little bit more my idea, because when Berachain launched the mainnet, I actually used it quite a bit to just kind of park some funds in it, and yeah, I was exploring apps, and yeah, it was basically DeFi. It was mostly what I could find, but it is a good definition. It makes sense what you're saying. Then I'm happy that what we built could help that, since you could a little bit more easily bring liquidity from other chains, right?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. I think this is mostly everything that I wanted to talk about and show. When we were preparing for this, I was like, I like to keep things short, 20-25 minutes max. Yeah, I didn't do good on that.
No, I usually think that these things take much longer as well, so it's all good. What I do want to see about just talking about, if it's all right, David, is if we can like post this link up, or for that matter, like mention it. Just like one small shill from our end is that Berachain is going to be holding basically a Build a Berathon. This is actually from Build a Bera, which is actually an incubator from the Berachain Foundation, like that works with the Berachain Foundation rather. And this is really an incubation to be able to kind of help apps raise money and actually go through an incubation to actually become, an actual product market fit. If you're familiar with accelerators, or incubators, this is the exact same thing. You can raise money, you get a seed amount, you're actually building a business from this perspective. Again, this is really getting at the idea of like bootstrapping companies and trying to find product market fit. And we're holding a big Build a Berathon in just after ETH New York. So it's going to be August 18th to 22nd. Applications are open right now. I don't know if there's a way where you could maybe like pin the tweet or maybe even show it here. I put it in the private chat here.
Okay. Sorry, I was slow. Yeah, I can definitely show that.
All good. But yeah, the idea is really we have applications are open right now. If you're in New York, if you're going to be sticking around after ETH New York as well, definitely bring up the applications. Like until August 4th is the deadline, and would love for teams to be able to kind of just start making applications. It's one of our firsts. And again, it's very focused on cash prizes to be able to say, hey, let's figure out a way to bootstrap you as a business and like turn something real on Berachain. And we're going to have a lot of different support. Myself, Jintao as well are going to be on location in New York, as well as a whole bunch of other like Berachain teams everybody from people who be able to help you out with how do you work out your pitch deck, what is your investment strategy, what is your tokenomics, like the team will be there to be able to really help you. So this is a really good time that if you do have an idea, make the application, and we would love to see you in New York to be able to see if we can work with you too. The other thing I want to shill is like for any other products or updates, I definitely recommend checking out our Berachain Devs Twitter account. We post updates on new BI, we call them BRIPs, or like the equivalent of EIPs. It's our Berachain IPs, whatnot, or initial proposals, where there's new changes that are coming up. One of the latest changes that we're implementing lately is we're going to fork the execution client. So that's forking Reth and Geth to have a custom execution client to do some very small tweaks, but we're keeping everything EVM compatible from that perspective. So if anybody is like wanting to keep up to date with new tech updates, this is definitely the place to kind of follow. And we'll be publishing more and more content and more articles, and hopefully more memes from Jintao as well, shilling Mudang on there as well. So, but yeah, cool. Those are probably my two shills and whatnot. David, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
No, it sounds pretty good. Good opportunity. And if anyone wants to start building with universal accounts on Berachain and start pulling in some liquidity from Solana, hit me up. I'll help.
Yes, increase those inflows. I'm totally for increasing inflows on Berachain.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Cool. Yeah, then I think we can probably start to wrap up here. Thank you very much, Manny and Jintao, for this, taking the time to be here with us, asking good questions. Hopefully my rambling was understandable enough.
No, it was good. And thanks for having us, David. Really, really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for having us, David. This was great.
Yeah, of course. And then as a reminder here, if anyone is still here, after this, we'll still have the videos will still be posted somewhere. We'll either post it on YouTube or Twitter again, probably at some point. I'll try to share all the various links to docs, GitHub, repositories, and so on and so forth. So at least we can help out that way.
Thanks again, David.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you.
Take it easy.
Bye bye.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Ciao.